Valorant's really only about the first 4 rounds. That's right, you heard me. While you do need 13 rounds to win a game, there are 4 particular rounds that will heavily dictate whether or not you're gonna be able to get there. And it all starts with the pistol. If we're able to spiral a pistol round into consecutive round wins, you've likely already won the match. Not just statistically, but mentally as well. In low elo games, some teams will just forfeit after losing the first 4 rounds. So the mental advantage is just as important to consider. Now, how do we win these rounds? And how can we maximize the edge we gain from winning them? That's what today's video is all about. Here's how you can win those initial rounds and ride that momentum to victory. And it all starts with the pistol round. This is the first and quite literally the most important round of the game. If you win this, you've not only the economic advantage, but also the mental advantage as well. By winning the pistol round, your chances of winning a second round are pretty high due to having more money for better weapons, abilities, and armor. And not only that, but you're granted a third bonus round that, if won, will give you another essentially free round. Your economy will likely be quite large at this point, which allows you to then have more full buy rounds for the half, and thus greater odds at winning those rounds. In simple terms, winning the pistol round can spiral into a long string of round wins for your team. But before we get into it, this video is just a glimpse of what we have to offer. If you want a full detailed guide on how to improve in Valorant, you want to go check us out at our website over at SkillCapped. But more on that at the end of the video. So how do we win the pistol round? Different ranks require different types of strategies to increase your odds of winning the pistol. At lower ranks such as Iron, Bronze, and Silver, rushing a site is going to be your best bet. At these ranks, players will rarely use abilities to try and slow you down, and this means your team can move as they please and get to the site quickly. This gives less time for the defenders to rotate before it's too late. Unless the defenders on site are aim beasts, your team will probably overwhelm them just with sheer numbers. The key to rushing is to rush. We see many players that are hesitant to run into the action, especially if they're the first man in. And these few seconds of delay are all the defenders need to rotate just in time to halt your push. So if you're gonna rush, make sure you're not letting go of W no matter what. After Silver, the pistol round becomes a little trickier. Players are smarter here, and they know how to safely gather info and slow down a rush. We won't be able to run through a whole choke point as easily without meeting some resistance. There are a few options we can do to try and counter this. The first one being a split push. On most maps, there are at least 2 different pathways to get onto a site. For example, on the B side of Ascent, you can push from Garage, or you can push through the middle and mark it into B. Pushing through both of these choke points will divide the attention of the defenders, therefore allowing your team to isolate more duels. By splitting, the defenders also have to divide up their utility. They can't just chuck everything into one point and slow down your team for days. And there's also fake pushing. This is when your team makes a ton of noise towards a site, thus making it appear like you're going to rush said site. This baits the defenders to rotate over to that site. Now the other sites are less occupied, and it's at this time that your team can stop the initial push and rotate over another site and then push that. If done quickly enough, you'll meet a nearly empty site and have free reign to take it. And to take that one step further, there's also delayed pushing. Your team starts with the same play, rushing hard to a site. The defenders will typically react by rotating and using abilities to slow you down. But the trick here is you don't commit to the push. You're simply baiting out abilities and rotations. Now the enemy has less utility available. Plus, if you delay well enough and the defenders don't tend to push, they'll have to respect the chance that you end up pushing another site. And this leads them to rotate back to their original postings. And now it's time to strike. Once the initial abilities dissipate, you charge in with abilities of your own. Smoke off the choke points, flash in, utilize mobility, everything. In this situation, you have strength in numbers, plus more abilities if you didn't waste them earlier. The odds are heavily in your favor to win out the duels and get the spike down. These are all great strategies to use on pistol rounds, and there isn't really one that's better than the other. Simply just utilize the one that your team seems most comfortable with and down to do. Okay, let's switch up sides for a bit. We know all the possible attacker plays that can be made, but what do we do as a defender to stop these plays? There's only one word you need to know here, and that is stall. Stall, stall, stall. The goal as a defender is to delay the attacker push as much as possible, so your team has enough time to rotate over and help you. Never let the attackers push comfortably onto your site. The first step to stalling is to get information as early and as quickly as possible. This could be done with initiator abilities, like Sova's Recon Dart, or by shoulder peeking key choke points. Remember, the goal here is more so information gathering rather than taking duels. Don't overextend yourself and end up wide open to enemy fire. Once you've found the enemy, you want to relay that to your team. If you hear or see multiple players rushing in, prepare to drop abilities to delay them. This could be a Sage Slow, a Barrier Orb, Molotov, Shock Dart. Throw anything and everything that would make an attacker halt their push, even if just for a second. It's important to use these abilities sparingly though. Again, abilities are limited with the pistol, so don't waste more than you can afford. If the enemy quiets down after your initial ability, you want to save your remaining abilities for the next time they make a ruckus. If you don't have any delaying abilities, you might want to switch positions with a teammate if you suspect the enemy's coming your way. That way your teammate can slow down the push once again, while giving time for everyone else to rotate during the actual push. The idea here is you want to have as many defenders present as possible when the attackers actually push. This will decrease the man advantage that the attackers have and therefore give you greater odds of actually winning the round. Alright, so now we won the pistol round and we have tons of credits to spend. What should we do now, you might be asking? Well, spend it. No matter what you do, spend these credits. Get your full armor, get your Spectre, Bulldog, get those abilities. Some of you might be thinking that saving this round would be beneficial so we could purchase a Vandal or a Phantom in the third round. Why go for a cheap Spectre or a Bulldog here? You'll just lose to the Vandal or Phantom in the third round. Well, if we were to save this round, we even the playing field and take away the advantage we gain from the pistol round. And this drastically increases the chances of us losing this second round and giving the economy edge to the enemy. And suddenly it's much harder for us to win rounds during this half as we have to save credits more often. Then this gives free rounds for the enemy and puts us in a huge disadvantage long term. So please, please, please spend those credits. Alright, here is the biggest rule in anti-eco rounds. Do not split up. I repeat, don't split up. During these rounds, the absolute worst thing you could do is get picked off and give the enemy a free weapon. The enemy can then take it and have much better odds of winning future aim duels now that they have equivalent weaponry. This could then lead to another player getting picked off and suddenly it's a 3 versus 5 and the enemy obtains 2 weapons that are equal in strength to yours, and this is why it's so important to stick together here. If someone gets picked off, having your teammates around to trade ensures the enemy doesn't get a man advantage. Sticking together also allows you to guard the fallen gun, which is key to denying further advantages to the enemy. Playing strength in numbers here when you have the superior weaponry should also nearly guarantee a round win. The second rule for anti-eco rounds is to still utilize your abilities. Abilities could completely change the tide of a round. For example, some players will stack a sight if they're saving. If you run into a stack, you'll have a much higher chance of losing the round with the chaos that's going to ensue. Using informational abilities like a Recon Dart or a Skydog prior to a push will ensure that you aren't running into these kinds of setups. Once the coast is clear, you can smoke out the choke points, flash in, and hit the site. This might seem a bit excessive, but again, it helps guarantee the round win for a relatively small cost. Abilities can completely change a duel. Even if the enemy has a shorty or a classic, a perfect blind could leave you defenseless and an easy kill. And this is why we don't want to skimp out on abilities ourselves. We risk losing the advantage if the defenders use abilities and we don't. Okay, so we got the easy anti-eco round out of the way. Now here comes the hardest of these 4 rounds, the bonus round. The enemy's gonna have rifles, while your team will, for the most part, have inferior equipment, and you're really expected to lose this round just with this fact alone. But that doesn't mean we can't make this round as winnable as possible. The rule of thumb for this round is to never go for 1v1 duels. The enemy has better weapons, so if we go for a straight 1v1, we're probably gonna lose. We need strength in numbers. This applies particularly for the defender side. As a defender, your team is typically split between several choke points. If the enemy pushes through one point and challenges the player, they're likely gonna win and get free access to the site. And because of this, we need to go with something a little more aggressive. A coordinated push with teammates will be your best bet. For example, one of the most common pushes on Haven defense is down, middle, and garage. We smoke off the window to prevent those players from getting into the action, and from there, both sides head toward grass. Because you're pushing from 2 different angles, the enemy's attention will be divided. they'll have to make a quick decision of where to place their crosshairs, which leads them to flicking over to one side and hitting an inaccurate spray. If we throw a well-timed flash during the push, the enemy will have a very hard time surviving and winning trades. If we gain the man advantage, we can back away a bit and play a little more passive. From this point, it's best to play cheeky, close-range angles that'll maximize damage and accuracy of lesser weapons like Spectre. Now, as an attacker, you want to make sure your team is pushing together. Don't try to make the hero play on your own, you're just gonna get eliminated. Targeting and overwhelming a specific defender will be the best way to try and take map control and have easier access to a side. Try to pick choke points that encourage more close-range duels. Like we just mentioned, SMGs will do better if we take closer fights. For example, if we're able to sneak into Cap from A long, we're gonna have some good close-range duels on our way to A side. The 3 spots we're likely gonna take duels at this point are Cat itself, Garden, and then players on side. Now, keep in mind, these are going to be much closer duels than if we were to go through A long. Right when we peek out of A long, we have to deal with long-range duels against any players in Generator, Heaven, or Hell. This long-range setup is absolutely perfect for a rifler to win out against an SMG. Seek out the closest range duels as possible, and challenge those people with as many players as possible. These 2 criteria give you the best odds of winning out against superior weaponry. Full disclosure though, even if we do these 2 things, the enemy still has the advantage here. The odds of you winning are slim, but with these tips, we can tip things more into our favor. Now, if you successfully win the 3rd round, you've got a huge advantage. Most players are going to get pretty distraught at losing a bonus round that should have been very easy, considering they have better rifles. Their mental has likely dropped from the round loss, along with the fact that the enemy's economy is going to be in shambles. The 4th round is another anti-eco, in which you want to play out similarly to the 2nd round. Play the numbers game. Deny the enemy any free weapons, and utilize abilities to coordinate a play. Now, you're up 4-0 with a very good economical advantage. You're probably going to be able to buy up nearly every round. Meanwhile, the enemy has to make sure they win consecutive rounds just to stand a fighting chance. If they win the 5th round and lose the 6th, their economy will likely be in the dumpster yet again. They're gonna have to save again, which grants another free round for your team. Meanwhile, you have rounds to play with due to the economy you've built up from the first 4 rounds. Let's say we did lose the bonus round though, which will happen in most cases. It's not a big deal. If we dealt at least some economic damage on the bonus, this will set us up well to make a big impact on round 4. And this economic damage is very likely to happen if we just follow the rules of strength in numbers and finding close range engagements. If we're able to take 2 or 3 eliminations and force those players to rebuy, their economy will be in a tight spot, and they can't afford to lose round 4 without risking another save. This is why round 4 is so crucial here. It can force another reset and grant you a 4-1 lead in a situation where the enemy has to string rounds together just to gain economy. Otherwise, they'll be in this buy save cycle for the entire half, and essentially, they give up nearly 50% of the round half to you if this cycle happens. That is it for today's video. We hope it gave you guys a new perspective on how a strong early start to a game can make a big difference in the overall match. So basically, get the early lead, you're gonna spiral, win multiple rounds in the half, and the enemy will be mentally shook and they're not gonna have time to react and adapt. And as always, we here at SkillCapped want to thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.